Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are wrestling with one of the most, polarizing concepts in finance debt. It's a word that seems to evoke immediate anxiety for so many people, yet it's the exact mechanism others use to build, vast, lasting wealth. This confusing paradox of debt. Is it a friend or an enemy? That's exactly what we need to cut through today. We've looked at a powerful stack of sources, and they position debt not as some kind of moral good or evil, but really just as a neutral tool. Our mission here is to understand how the financially sophisticated use this tool for leverage and, how the rest of us can sometimes accidentally turn it into an overwhelming liability.
Yeah, that neutrality is key. It's the most, I think, intellectually honest place to start. Fundamentally, debt is simple, right? It's just borrowing money now with a binding promise to pay it back later, usually with interest. It's basically a time trade, getting something now, paying later. But the real power or danger lies in how quickly that simple transaction can either accelerate your progress or, conversely, really crush your future freedom. And maybe before we go any further, it's worth mentioning the distinction the research immediately brings up, secured versus unsecured debt.
Ah, right. Good point.
Secured debt is tied to an asset the lender can take back, like a house or a car if you default. Unsecured debt, think credit cards, there's no collateral. And that's why lenders charge much higher interest rates on unsecured debt. The risk for them dictates the cost for you. That difference is, well, it's vital to understanding how to use this tool.
Okay, so that immediately raises the stakes. It frames debt as this mechanism of risk transfer. So, our goal for you, the listener, is to help you move beyond just fear and into strategy. Understanding the measurable difference between using debt as, let's say, leverage and just passively carrying it as a crippling liability. Okay, let's unpack this. Maybe starting with how debt can be used as a springboard for growth.
Right. We can start with what the sources often call the Great Divide. It's debt used as an investment versus debt used purely as an expense.
Okay, let's call that investment side good debt. This is a debt that's explicitly, future focused. It functions as leverage. It helps you build wealth or substantially increase your income or maybe acquire an asset that genuinely grows in value over time.
Exactly. And to make that actionable, we need some concrete examples where the math really checks out. Good debt could be, say, a strategic business loan. You use it to buy profitable equipment or expand operations. But the key is, the profit generated has to far exceed the loan's cost. Another classic example, a mortgage on a primary home or maybe an investment property. Provided, and this is a big caveat, provided the purchase is well within your means. Here, you're leveraging a relatively low-interest loan, secured debt, remember, to control an asset that hopefully appreciates. The debt itself is essentially paying for future equity.
But the sources definitely stress a major warning here, especially around education debt. We often just label student loans as good debt almost automatically. But how often does that actually turn out to be wrong? A fallacy.
It becomes a fallacy if there's no clear return on investment, the ROI, right? Education debt is only truly good if the degree or the skills you get demonstrably increase your long-term earning power. And that increase has to be more than the interest you're paying over the life of the loan. If you borrow, say, six figures for a degree that only gives you a marginal income boost, well, that debt quickly becomes a suffocating liability, not an investment.
So the golden rule holds then. If the debt is a calculated stepping stone, if it demonstrably helps you earn or grow more than the interest costs you over time, then it's good debt. It creates future cash flow instead of just draining your present cash flow. Okay. But if that's the strategic good side, how do we slide into the dangerous territory, what the sources are calling bad debt?
Right, that's the liability side. And it's almost always unsecured debt we're talking about here, which means high interest rates, bad debt costs you money, and crucially, it doesn't increase your value, your income, or your equity. Not really. It's typically used to buy consumables or things that lose value almost immediately. You're trading future freedom for, well, temporary satisfaction. And this is where we see the usual suspects, right? Carrying big credit card balances for non-essentials, eating out, shopping, vacations you haven't actually saved up for, or maybe high-interest personal loans used purely for consumption. Even car loans can become bad debt if the amount, or maybe the loan term, stretches your budget too thin for an asset that's, let's face it, depreciating rapidly.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting for me. Because if the math is so clearly against us with bad debt, why do so many people get caught? The sources seem to tackle how the system kind of keeps us trapped. They talk about the interest trap, specifically through how long we take to pay.
That's exactly right. We need to look beyond just the compound interest calculation itself. The real trap isn't always just the rate, although that's bad enough. It's often the minimum payment structure. When you carry a high-interest credit card balance, that minimum payment, it's usually designed to be just enough to cover the month's interest. And maybe a tiny fraction of the actual principal you owe. This creates what some call the duration trap. It's insidious. Banks and lenders get rich not just from the percentage rate they charge, but from the duration of the loan, how long it takes you to pay it back. By keeping your principal balance high for years, sometimes decades, they maximize the total interest they collect. Often you end up paying 2, maybe even 3 times the original purchase price for that item. You are, in effect, working for the bank for years, just for that one thing you bought.
Wow. That really reframes high interest debt, doesn't it? It's like a hidden wealth transfer mechanism. You're literally building someone else's assets with your own future time and effort. Okay, now let's dig into the critical nuance here, because few things in finance are purely black and white. We've established that even good debt, potentially, can turn bad. When does that slippery slope become, well, a cliff edge?
It usually happens when the initial optimism runs into the hard reality of life. A key insight from the material is that good debt often stops being good when it starts sacrificing your financial stability for that future potential. The classic example is stretching your debt-to-income ratio, your DPI, way too thin.
Explain DTI quickly.
Sure, DTI is just the percentage of your gross monthly income, your income before taxes. That goes towards paying all your monthly debt payments. Mortgages, car loans, student loans, credit card minimums, everything. Financial prudence, most experts suggest, means keeping that number well below 35%, maybe even lower. If you push your DTI up to, say, 45% or 50% with a really aggressive mortgage or a large business loan, then any small financial shock, a job loss, a medical bill, even just a dip in the market affecting your business, turns that leverage into paralyzing stress. Suddenly, the debt is a source of instability, not opportunity.
So the critical test, the question you really have to ask yourself before taking on debt, is pretty simple then. Will this debt genuinely make me materially richer in the long run, or will it just make me feel stressed out and busy trying to keep up?
Exactly. And this leads us straight into the psychology of it all. Debt is intensely emotional. It's heavily driven by cognitive biases we all have. We often suffer from optimism bias, right? We overestimate our future earning potential or our ability to stick to that repayment schedule perfectly. And that's often coupled with the immediate gratification bias. The pleasure of buying something now feels much more real and powerful than the abstract, distant pain of paying for it later.
So that immediate gratification versus the future cost. That feels like the profound perspective shift the sources are really pushing for. When you borrow for consumption, you are making an explicit trade. You are spending your future time, your future energy right now, today.
Yes, that reframing changes the whole conversation. It moves it from, can I afford the monthly payment, which is often misleading, to, is this item truly worth X hours of my future life energy? That simple, maybe slightly brutal calculation forces a clearer separation between our emotional wants and our actual financial needs. And if the emotional weight of the debt, the anxiety, the pressure, the guilt starts to outweigh the benefit you got from the purchase, then it was bad debt, almost regardless of what you bought.
Okay. So once we understand that nuance and the emotional traps we can fall into, the next logical step is building a proactive strategy, making debt actually work for you, positioning it entirely.
Right. And the strategy here is all about calculated intent. It's not accidental. First, as we kind of established, borrow only for things that have a strong likelihood of appreciating in value, generating income, or significantly enhancing your human capital, your skills, and earning potential. Second, and this is just non-negotiable according to the research, you must always calculate the total cost, including all the interest, and establish a concrete, probably aggressive repayment plan before you ever sign those loan papers. No borrowing on a whim.
And what about managing the debt you might already have or are considering? Beyond keeping that DTI below 35%, how should you prioritize repayment?
The consensus is pretty clear. Focus intensely, like laser focus, on eliminating your high-interest, unsecured debt first. That 20% credit card balance, treat it like a financial five-alarm fire. Get rid of it. Why? Because the money you save by eliminating that high interest rate isn't just saved, it's money you can then immediately redirect. You can apply it to building your investments or paying down lower interest, maybe secured debt much more quickly. It frees up cash flow. There's a mantra that captures this well. Never borrow to impress, only borrow to progress. If the debt is tied primarily to boosting your social image, buying status symbols, it's almost certainly a liability in disguise. If it's directly tied to growing an income statement or improving your balance sheet, well then it has the potential to be leverage.
The source material offers a really brilliant concept connected to this prioritization idea. It's the power of early payoff, creating what they call a guaranteed return. Can you explain why this is such a powerful mindset shift for people?
Yes. This is, I think, perhaps the single most important takeaway for anyone serious about achieving true financial freedom. When you pay off a high-interest debt, let's stick with that 15% or 20% interest credit card example. The money you save in future interest payments, the interest you now won't have to pay. It is financially and mathematically identical to earning a risk-free, guaranteed 15% or 20% return on an investment. Think about that. You simply cannot find a guaranteed 15% or 20% return anywhere in the normal investment market, not without taking on huge risk. Therefore, every single extra dollar you can find to throw at that high-interest debt isn't just paying it down, it's generating a massive guaranteed return for you. It immediately buys you back future cash flow and ultimately future freedom. It is arguably the smartest, highest return financial move most people can make.
So, bringing this all together, what does this mean for you, the listener? We've covered the technical definitions, the psychological traps, the strategic roadmap. Where does that leave us?
It really brings us back to that idea of balance and, crucially, intentionality. The goal isn't necessarily total debt avoidance for everyone all the time. That might not even be optimal. The goal is debt mastery. Smart, financially savvy people use debt strategically as a temporary intentional bridge to get across to a better financial position faster, maybe to gain assets or skills more quickly than they could just by saving. But once that bridge has served its specific purpose, you move forward. You get off the bridge. You don't stay parked on it, paying tolls indefinitely.
That perfectly sums up the central thesis, I think. Debt is a sophisticated tool, nothing more, nothing less. Good debt is calculated leverage that can open doors. Bad debt is often an emotional liability that chains you down. And the difference lies entirely in your purpose, your discipline, and crucially, the plan you actually execute. Borrow to build, not just to impress.
And we really have to touch on that societal pressure one last time. Society often glorifies the flex, right? The expensive car, the designer clothes, the big house. Instant gratification looks like success. But remember, every single time you take on debt, just to maintain some kind of fleeting image for others, you are literally exchanging your actual future time, your future energy, and your future freedom, often just for someone else's temporary opinion of you. True financial freedom isn't really about looking rich today. It's not about the external show. It's about the internal peace of mind, knowing that your income and your time genuinely belong to you. That separation from the duration trap we talked about, that ability to sleep soundly at night knowing your finances are stable, that is the real flex.
An incredibly powerful note to end on. Thank you. And speaking of that guaranteed return concept, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, rooted in that core strategy. The best kind of debt is always the one you no longer owe. So we want you to look at your current highest interest liability right now. Think about it. What specific debt could you eliminate or at least substantially reduce the lifetime cost of with just a small extra payment this week? Maybe just $50 or $100. Calculate the exact amount of that guaranteed return that single small action would yield for your future self, for your future freedom. Go figure it out. We'll talk to you next time on The Deep Dive.